Here in a second, if everybody's ready. So good evening. I'd like to welcome to the Marine City Town Hall. Today's Tuesday, September 23rd at around 6:36 p.m. We have two topics tonight. Topic A will be understanding your water and sewer bills, and that will be presented by Marine City Clerk Jason Bell and Marine City Treasurer Katie Posey. The second topic tonight will be water and sewer rates, the science behind the setting of the Marine City Water and Sewer Rate Study. And that'll be presented by the Michigan Rural Water Association team member Joe Vanderblin. He's a water circuit rider, and Matt Lumbert, a wastewater technician. Tonight's town hall will follow a very simple structure. Both city staff and MRWA team members will present information. We assume there'll be some questions regarding the presentations. We ask that you hold your questions to the end of the presentation. Both segments will have question and answer periods. We make sure that we get to everyone's question by a staff member. This is not a regularly scheduled meeting for the Board of the Commissioners. Any attending commissioners are here as interested residents. They will not answer questions as sitting commissioners. Future Board of Commission meetings will allow for question and comments to our commission members. The process for review of the Marine City Water and Sewer Rates began in the fall of 2024, and it's continued since then. The city received notification from the state of Michigan where the city's audit was submitted regarding deficiencies found in the water and sewer enterprise funds. With the state flagging the city's rate structure as deficient, we were able to enter an agreement with the Michigan Rural Water Association for assistance in reviewing our water and sewer rates. This service is provided by the MRWA are free to the city of Marine City. For many years, there's been a significant lack of structured planning regarding the city's enterprise utility funds for water and sewer. I am personally not aware of a recent professional study being done on the Marine City water and sewer rates over many years. Over the last decade at least, internal staff worked to provide water and sewer rate information to the Board of Commissioners. Many of the factors required for the appropriate settings of water and sewer rates did not exist until recently. Over the last 10 months, city staff, we have initiated and completed multiple facility assessment reviews at a minimum 13 different facilities, a capital improvement plan for wastewater at our wastewater treatment facility, the start of renovation work on the waterworks plant, started a 2-year large-scale water main infrastructure project, and began addressing critical underground infrastructure such as collapsed sanitary and storm system components. We have ongoing SAW and CCTV and GIS infrastructure work being done and completed as well. All these factors and many others contribute to the setting of water and sewer rates and our quality of life here in Marine City. We hope to provide knowledge about these issues for our residents, businesses, and visitors alike. We are diligently working to address structural issues and deficiencies in several areas. Providing factual information and communication with our residents is a crucial component of that process. I wish to thank the hardworking staff members of the City of Marine City, especially tonight our City Clerk and Treasurer, as well as the Michigan Rural Water Association team members, Joe and Matt, both who have contributed hundreds of hours to the city efforts. And we'll start with City Treasurer and City Clerk.
Good evening, everybody. First off, City Clerk Jason Bell, Treasurer Katie Posey. We're going to go over kind of how to read your water bill. You all have a sample water bill in front of you that is, one's a current one. It is not somebody's water bill. You can see we changed all the information on there. We're going to go over briefly kind of what all those codes are. Katie is going to touch on a little bit of what those funds are used for. And then we'll give you at the very end what the proposed bill will look like with some rate changes and everything that's going to simplify it for residents. So without further ado, this is the overall water bill that you'll see. Sorry, go back. This is actually what residents get, this full water bill. So that is the actual water bill that they'll receive in the mail. And then here, if we look at our header, it has the service address on the top, your account number, and what billing section you are in. I'll just briefly go over. The sections are as follows. Section 3 are billed in February, May, August, and November. Section 4 is March, June, September, and December. and Section 5 are January, April, July, and October. So they're billed on a quarterly basis. Next one is the, water resident or water owner, whoever the account name is in, and the mailing address of where it goes to. And then finally, over here to the right, you have the amount of your water bill, the due date right below that, and then the amount due after the due date, which assesses a penalty on it. This next page here, we're going to talk about commodity charges for water and sewer. So this is a commodity charge based on usage. So you'll see here highlighted in red, the WA is your commodity charge for water, and the SW is your commodity charge for sewer. So if you see all the way here to your right, or to the left, right next to WA, you see a reading. I believe it says 1280. And then you're going to see a read to the right by that date. That is the current read. So that's how we get your commodity charge. So this bill, for instance, it was 15 units of usage. 1 unit, you can see the far right, equals 1,000 gallons. So this user, this resident used 15,000 gallons of water in 1 quarter. That's then multiplied by the
Unit.
the unit is multiplied by the rate of water at $7.88 per unit and gives you your total all the way at the far right. Same for sewer, it uses the same read off of that water. It's 1 for 1, so again 15 units of usage multiplied by the $6.24 per unit, which gives you your $93.60 total due. Katie?
So your commodity charges, we have an ordinance that reads what they should be used for. We use them and combine them with other funds with the city to pay for wages, benefits, contractual costs to run the plants, plant operations, utility billing software, minor land billing, equipment repairs, things that wouldn't be huge capital projects, monitoring systems for both plants and the tower. And it's basically like your normal daily operations is what we use them for. I took a 3-year average on water commodity collected, and we collect about $950,000 a year in that line. It fluctuates, which you'll see in Bill's presentation as well. In sewer commodity, annually we collect about $491,000. Since it's on metered sales and usage, that revenue fluctuates. So it's not guaranteed every year. Good, yeah.
Is there how do you come up with the wastewater figure? There's a calculation to that?
For the commodity charge per unit?
Yeah.
Yes, and Joe will cover that a little bit later too when he gives his presentation as well. The next slide here, we're going to understand your ready-to-serve fees. Those are towards the bottom of your bill, highlighted here in red. So the RS is your ready-to-serve sewer, and your RW is your ready-to-serve water. And these are both flat rates. So they're based on the water rate ordinance that's presented and approved by the commission. So not based on usage, they're just flat across the board. That's what every resident gets charged based on the meter size. So this one you can see here is just for a residential 5/8 meter. The ready-to-serve sewer is $17.20, and the ready-to-serve water is $11.80. So flat rate.
So ready to serve is collected, and then when we collect the money each month, we restrict it and set it aside. Not used for normal operations per our ordinance. We do have to sometimes because the other revenue is fluctuating, and if it's not there to use to pay the bills, we have to use some of this. But we restrict it for capital improvements and underground work, plant repairs, equipment needed for the DPW workers who work on infrastructure. These revenues are more consistent because you do get them billed even if you don't have any water service on at the time. Anything else you want to talk about that? Flat bills, flat rates?
One thing I do want to point out too, because we do get questions on this a lot, that people say, I don't live in a house, or I've moved out, or the house is vacant, why do I still have a water bill? We still have a base bill in Marine City. That's based on those ready-to-serve fees on water and sewer. And then now you'll see this later on in the next slide. the debt service fees. So those are based on debt that we have to collect on bonds and everything. So I believe our base water bill is somewhere over $70, $71 in there. That's with no usage. So that's not based on any commodity usage or anything like that. So there is actually a base bill that every water service customer would pay, regardless of usage. Next one we're going to talk about is our debt services. We currently have two on here. This first one we're going to talk about is the DW code, which is for the DWSRF project that's going on right now, the $26 million project, replacement of underground infrastructure to do with water. So all the water mains, any lead lines going into houses and everything. This is to cover the bonds that we got for that, half loan and then half grant on the bonds. This is a flat rate based on a calculation of residential equivalent units, which there's a big formula that we went into when we created that ordinance when those bonds came down. It is available in city offices. There's a big breakdown of it. It goes by how many water users we have, the overall debt that needs to be paid, and then divided out multi-unit customers, so apartment complexes, things like that. If they only have one water meter, those are equated in there. So if it's a 6-unit apartment complex, they're being charged 6 of those instead of just one, to where a regular household resident would just be that one flat rate. So it does get equated out to multiple, and those are factored into that equation
And
as
meter
well.
size.
And meter size. So those do differentiate based on meter size as well. And those are available in city offices if you want to see that chart and that breakdown presented with the ordinance when we passed it. But I'll be more than happy to get anyone a copy that wants to look at that and see the breakdown based on size. Your next code here is the WW, which is a debt collection for previous bonds, and that is based on commodity. So that is based on your usage at $1.20 per unit. So you see here, we go back to the read, just like your water and sewer commodity, at that $12.85, 65.
$12.80 and then $12.65.
Yep. So it's 15 units of usage equals out to $18. This is for bonds. I'm not even sure the date. Maybe Katie can give me on that, but I believe those are
30 years ago.
set to go off next year.
This year is
This
our
year.
last payment.
2005.
Yeah, yep. So just a little bit on those. Everybody can see the construction going on, the drinking water project. Currently, the loan hasn't really been used. They have us draw the grant funds first. So we're collecting, but there's going to be some huge payments going out on those soon. For 24-25, we started collecting in January of 25. We've collected about $165,000. Our projected annual principal payment on that loan is between $315,000 and $455,000, depending on the year. It does increase as years go on. It's at 2%, and we financed $12,221,414, which seems like a lot, but we actually got quite from the state, more than that from the state for a grant. So the WW one is we collect about $102,000 annually. I think it's important to note, because this rate was based on commodity, we're not sure why they did that back when we got it, but we're not even collecting enough on that to pay the bond payment. The bond payment every year is $150,000, and the interest is variable because it goes down each year, but $8,695 this year, so it'll be paid off this year, but not going away. Yeah, I think so, unless anybody has questions.
Next slide here is understanding your miscellaneous fees. So there's a few miscellaneous fees here. I don't want to say that they're worthless by any means, but they are miscellaneous. Most of them are flat fee. Your first two you're going to see here, the AW is for an admin charge on water. That's a flat rate at $2.41 on every bill. And the SS is a sewer storm maintenance, also at a flat rate of $3 per bill. The next one here at the bottom, the WM, is going to be a water monitoring fee. That's also a flat rate at $3.62 per bill.
These fees also get restricted and set aside the sewer storm maintenance one, and the water monitoring. Why separate lines, I'm not 100% sure why, other than the water monitoring, because that was a program. The admin charge goes in with the commodity charges to cover normal expenses. We collect, it's not much, but on admin charge for water, it's about $24,000 a year. Sewer storm maintenance, about $28,000 a year, and water monitoring is about $29,000 a year.
Katie, can you speak to what we spend in administrative charge versus what we take in, if you have that available?
Total budget?
Yeah.
You
didn't bring it with
total
you?
budget, but I definitely can answer that with that.
Go- if you
I
can.
didn't think we were getting that detailed today.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I did,
It's well over 24,000, that's for sure.
so we're not taking in enough to cover our current costs?
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and our next slide here, explanation of billing codes and rates. If you look at the bottom of the bill that you all have a copy of, all of them are spelled out on the bottom, what each code stands for, and gives kind of a description, as well as our water and sewer rates. It gives you that breakdown of what 1 unit equals 1,000 gallons. It gives you the water rate per unit, sewer rate per unit, and then that WW, which is that debt collection fee at $1.20 per unit. You'll see on this next slide, and I'll go a little more detailed, and I think Joe will talk about this later as well, so I won't go very detailed on it. But some of these will go away to make the bill more simpler to read. It's not that any of these charges are necessarily going away, but this won't be as, unfortunately, this won't be as busy down at the bottom.
That's the
And you'll
goal.
see that on the next slide
That's the goal.
here as well.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about any of the balances? in those?
We can, I have the sheet up there. I did bring the balance sheet as of August 31st. Sorry, I thought it had it with me. Yep. All right, so he has it in the spreadsheet he was gonna show you. Last year, admin charges were just under 280,000.
And we took in 24,000.
24, correct. So after, all those funds that get restricted, not used for normal, currently, between all four of those accounts, we have about 1.566 million restricted. One of the interesting notes I want to make out is our cash right now in those accounts is just over 1.7 million. That leaves just under $156,000 in there for operating costs right now to run operations for water sewer. So just want to show and explain the reasoning for the proposed changes.
And in case anybody wonders, our cost of operation far exceed $156,000 a year.
Yeah. Not necessarily in 1 month, but that's what's
Yeah.
sitting there. So even though the ordinance doesn't say to use capital, it's supposed to be specific for capital, we have in the past had to bite into that capital just to cover operations.
And then our last slide for you tonight is your proposed water bill with the codes. You should have a copy of that as well. This one here kind of breaks it down, cleans it up a little bit, and Joe will go into far more detail on this than I will, because I think it wraps into his presentation a little bit more. But you see there that a lot of those codes are eliminated, and there is a reason behind that with the study that we did, and where we're kind of going with this, or proposing with this, on our rates and everything else. It cleans up the water bill. I think it makes it easier to understand for residents as well. And then you see that at the bottom too, that explanation of codes kind of cleans that up. Some of them will stay because they're not a normal billing, but they are things that we can bill for, like a meter in, a meter charge. There's a turn on, turn off fee that doesn't always stay on there. If it's requested, that's on there. Fire suppression or sprinkler systems, those are billed on there for certain accounts. So those codes would end up staying, but they're not on every single bill. So you're going to see like the sprinkler or fire suppression more on commercial properties than you would a residential property. And that is all we have for understanding your water bill.
Is there any questions from anybody here?
He's got the fun stuff, so. Yeah.
Sure. If you could speak louder or walk up here, because we're trying to pick this up for the public, if you wouldn't mind, up close to those microphones so we can hear you. Right in front there, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I see the proposed one. We both, basically comes out to the same amount that's due, but there is no breakdown whatsoever where the money, how'd you get to that number? So I mean, you're making it simpler, but you're not telling me anything.
So we didn't get too detailed on that. The total bill is going to change, but he is going to present those rates and how that will change. But we didn't put it on there because we didn't want to overshadow his presentation.
We just wanted to show
Okay.
the
On the water
lines,
rates.
how the lines would be.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that's why you see zero in all those columns,
Right.
then it still equals to
Yeah.
$330. I know it's confusing, but we should have whited that out. But it was more so for the codes on there where you would see a simplification. And I think Joe will answer a lot of those questions too for you on how you'd get that computation.
Yep.
Can you give a little bit more explanation on how the admin charges are used? Because I know I always hear that a lot about, well, it's an admin charge, and they think it's just like for the person that takes their money.
Right.
So can you give a little bit more information on that and maybe into the cost of operation? What are you spreading it out for?
So, it's a huge equation, but, there are multiple people who touch water sewer in the city. We have the, obviously, plant operations, which we pay out contractual services to for them. Then we have wages and benefits and all the costs that go on to employees at DPW. They all work on water sewer. The utility billing clerk, she gets paid a portion out of water sewer. Treasurer's positions get paid out of water sewer. Clerk, deputy clerk, city manager. So there's a lot of people, like you get your bill and you come in and pay it, but there's a lot of touching hands. And every single one of those people, a percentage of their wages and benefits come out of water sewer. If we didn't do it that way, we wouldn't be collecting near enough in the general fund side to cover wages and benefits. I think that's one thing that maybe there's a misunderstanding on. The city runs off of several, they call them funds in accounting matters, but when you collect property taxes, the little over 15 mils, that goes into our general fund. Technically, we're not supposed to use any of that money to run water sewer operations because they're enterprise funds that are supposed to be basically like consumer paid for. So whatever it costs to run your water sewer departments, that is supposed to be revenue generated from the users of the system, where taxes is just general fund operations. So almost everybody in the city is split up between all these multiple accounts. Same thing with street funds. We get street funds from the state. Those are separate. We can only use those on streets and things related to streets and storm sewer, but not water sewer. So there isn't just one lump sum of money. When I say we have $155,000 in cash, that's just in water sewer. We still have, a lot of other different funds that we work through. So is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they always think it's just one person.
Right, it's just one fund, one person, she runs, but honestly, the biggest expense probably to water sewer is the contractual services to pay for plant operations, for normal, and then payroll, because the DPW guys, if I had to estimate, I would say now it's a lot more, but on a normal basis, probably over 60% of their work is water sewer related.
As an example, I'll give you a typical month of operation at the water and wastewater treatment plants. Our company that we hire out is a little around $500,000 a year. And then in terms of overtime, emergencies, call-outs and everything, probably another $100,000. And then 60% of the DPW, and I think it's probably more right now. We're probably close to 80%, pretty much all hands on deck. In the last year, we've replaced 2 clarifiers. In the last month, we did $20,000 worth of work at the wastewater treatment plant on a SCADA alarm system. We are still waiting for a generator transfer switch for the Bell River pump station, which is another $8,000. We put $27,300 into the roof that was gone at the Bell River Pump Station. We have a grit room that has constant flooding issues that we have a price tag of about $500,000 to take. And then we have significant capital improvement and equipment issues that right now we're under violation from Eagle at the wastewater treatment plant. So we have things that we have to address. That money, that operational money, and the ready-to-serve funds all go for those type of things on a day-to-day basis. So as you look at it, you say, well, geez, operations has all these people. It's people, it's equipment, it's a collection of everything for the system to allow the system to operate. And I want the residents to understand, to operate your own wastewater treatment plant, your own water plant, it is expensive. It is an expensive job. As an example, the water project at Wonder, we didn't ask for that water project. That was mandated by the state of Michigan under a consent order. So we responded to that, and as Katie said, thank God we've gotten a great loan and grant program through the state, but that was only based on the quality of the issues we had at our water plant. That's currently under renovation. We're trudging the same way with the wastewater treatment plant. Many of those items in that facility are 80 to 90 years old. So we have a significant infrastructure problem in terms of equipment and facilities. All that's figured into that. So literally, we've been robbing Peter to pay Paul for a number of years, and as they said, we're spending far more for administrative or operational than what we take in. And it's a system that candidly can't be kicked any further down the road. You have to deal with these things now. So that's part of our process as we study this. We talk about the things that go into these billings and the accounts. We want to make sure that everybody understands. You can't control the commodity, the use, how much water you use. But there are, as Jason said, certain fees that are inherent in every bill. Even if you use zero water, you're still going to get a charge because that system, the infrastructure, all those parts are still part and parcel of delivering that service.
It's
Available.
Yeah. Some of the things, I know I work here and I talk about it every day, but, you know, the amount of lab testing and process chemicals and things used to treat the water, treat the sewage, that thousands and thousands of dollars spent on stuff we don't even see, right? We just see the clear water and toilet flushing at the end, but the dollar signs between that, from the plant to your house, and everybody's seen inflation, those costs I've been here just under 3 years, and the bills have skyrocketed on those. And we're required to do it. We have to lab test every so often. They have to test all those things. So it's not something you can say, well, we're just not going to do that anymore. We have to. It's a must. So
If you look, we report to the state multiple times a day in testing of water.
Okay, I understand we're doing all new, getting all this in, something that we've been kicking down the road for a long time. Preventative maintenance, now that this is new,
Yeah.
is there a program for that? Because a lot of times, things from government, hey, we can afford to put this in, we put it in, but now we walk away from it.
that's what this is about.
That's a great
It's about
question.
Saving for the future.
Yep.
Because we can't do this again. We can't come back in another 40 years and go, what do we do now? There's no programs available, so that's what this is about, doing rate studies and that to make sure that we have all of our capital costs listed from these different things we did, the different CIPs, capital improvement plans and that, and they project out costs in so many years, and we save a little bit for that every year.
In regards,
He'll show you some of that in the presentation as well.
in regards to preventative maintenance, yes, we are. So as an example, on that water main project, we're installing multiple new valves. Everybody knows we've had a difficult time controlling the water flow and turning water off, hence a number of boil alerts or low water pressure. Now we'll have a program of exercising those wells, preventative maintenance, exercising those valves, excuse me,
Okay.
so that type of thing is taken care of.
Yep.
Okay.
And they've been doing cameraing, that's probably, he calls it the saw, but they've been doing cameraing all the lines in that. That's also to come up with a plan to know which ones are bad and which ones we need to replace in so many years, how many feet, what we think it's gonna cost. obviously, we're guessing on some of it, but at least trying and saving a little bit for it is better than getting there and going, oh, no.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
it's important to note too, you know, with planning, the way we are with capital improvement plans and facility assessments and stuff too, this project that we're currently undergoing only replaces 2/3 of those underground water mains. So there's gotta be a plan going forward as well to replace that last 1/3 of also aging infrastructure, that didn't fall under those guidelines of the project and that grant, but there has to be planning with that too. So, and he'll touch on that a lot more, you know, with that planning and the saving with the ready to serve and the capital improvement.
Any other questions? Thank you, great questions. Thank you, Jason, Katie.
Thank you.
Joe?
This is more fun. Thank you. Technology's great when it works, right?
See if it works.
Yeah.
Same issue.
Oh. There you go. Yeah, it's on this. It's reading that there's another display. It's not coming up on the TV. Yeah, that means my computer is seeing another screen, but it's not coming up on. Yeah, I can give that one a try. Yeah. Yep. Let's see, just-
You needed a quick break so you can think of all the questions going forward now, see? Yes. Please.
Maybe while they're getting that set up, could we talk about like how we came to the point of having this organization do the study, and how that came up for us? With that, we had to do the water rate study and come up with the numbers and how the state decided that it was time. for
Sure,
us to
Katie,
do
why
that.
don't you go into that and explain
Yeah.
how we submit the
So
audit?
every year we get audited and our annual audit has to be submitted to the state by December 31st of every year. This year, they do, believe it or not, they do look at them. I used to think, oh, you just turn them in, they don't look at them. Last year? Yeah, last year,
There we go.
I got an email randomly from somebody at the state, and at first I thought it was, I'm like, is this spam? I even talked to the IT guys, and we're like, is this, they're like, no, it's a legit email. Because our rates were not covering our costs in the way it all worked out in our audit, they recommended us to them. And that's, it was
flagged us.
it flagged us. It was basically, hey, and I think Joe has said, I mentioned it to him, you said that's how you get a lot of your customers, like to
Yes.
do rate studies, because the state flags them and then tells them, hey, you have an option to use this company that's free, you don't have to, go out and get somebody to do it. So that's kind of how they were basically saying, you have a problem with your rates and your expenses and your revenues coming in they're not sustainable, so.
And from the staff side, looking
knew-
at
I
this,
knew
we
we
knew
knew
we had a
that.
problem.
Yeah,
We
we knew
realized we had a
that.
problem, but we also realized we probably needed some professional assistance
Right.
in studying the problem and looking at all factors that should be involved in the process to make sure that we do it correctly and then adhere to not only the state standards, but industry standards.
Yeah.
So that we have something we can point back to and say, this is how it's done, and then Joe's going to explain that, this is the reasoning behind it, this is the standard that it follows.
From a staff point, you know, I put together a budget, we worked through a budget, but you don't have the tools to plan these things, the capital improvement plans, knowing what infrastructure, you know, I don't know what needs to be done at the, what, you know, DPW or, you know, without those sort of plans in place and looking at them annually and reviewing them and moving things off and moving things down, it's really hard to budget. You kind of budget on your normal expenses, but then the other things that maybe you don't foresee or emergencies come up and you're not ready for them. And that's the goal, is to be prepared and ready and, you know, if something breaks down, we're like, okay, well, it was on the list in 2 years, now we move it down to this year.
It's unfortunate,
But you can work through it.
we hadn't had up-to-date capital improvement plans in the city for quite some time, very candidly. And whether it be facilities or equipment or a number of different things, they just were incomplete or not done correctly or done at all. So we kind of started from scratch
Right.
with equipment, facilities, acquisitions, each department. And we realize now that that's needed for long-term planning in terms of, as Katie says, we see we have a problem, we get the life cycle of your car. You expect the last 15 years, at last 7 years, you got to make a decision. Do I go out and buy another car? Do I buy a used car? It's no different than us determining, okay, we think this roof will last us 20 years. It's only lasted us 16, and it's in trouble. It's impacting our operation. So what do we change now to fix the roof and then maybe get another couple of years out of something else? But when you have the volume of equipment and facilities that the city has and that they're mandated by law to make sure that they function correctly, it's a big responsibility, and it takes a lot of resources to do that, very candidly.
And honestly, we, like, same thing like the backhoe and those sort of things. You can
Yeah.
also get rid of some of your assets at the right time, so that we're not necessarily losing on them. We can turn them in for newer equipment, 10, 15 years newer, but get some money back still on our assets. So it's important for things like that too. So you know, its lifespan is 15 years, okay, we're at 10, but we turn it in and we can get a newer one for cheaper, you know, because of the turn-in, instead of keeping it till it dies. Yeah, yeah, so those sort of things too.
All right, Joe.
It's on
All
you.
right. So my name's Joe Van Dowlen, as stated earlier. I work for Michigan Rural Water Association. We are a nonprofit funded by either USDA or EPA, depending on which of my coworkers and what program we're in. My program happens to be funded through EPA. And we are funded to provide technical assistance to rural communities on water and wastewater needs. And basically any community under 10,000 population, okay, which you guys definitely fall into that category, which is why I was able to provide the services that I was free of charge, okay, because EPA is funding me to go out there and provide this type of assistance to communities, okay, so that you guys don't have to pay for them. Okay, so I've got two different presentations. The first one's the water, and then I'll do the sewer presentation. The sewer presentation will go a little bit quicker than the water, because the explanation is exactly the same. It's just different numbers. And the reason why they're in two separate presentations is because when we use our rate program to calculate the rates, we have to break them up into those two different categories, because the reserve requirements, the capital needs are different. The cost to run the wastewater versus the water plant is totally different, and they're separate entities. Okay, so even though everything is included on one water and sewer bill, you have to look at water individually separate from sewer. Okay, so I'll go through the water, then I'll go through the sewer real quick, and then I'll be here to answer any questions you guys have. The whole point of this is you guys now see what goes on your actual bill. This is the explanation of where all the numbers come from and why the rate program is saying that, you know, the proposed rates should be what they are. This is not a throw a dart at a dartboard and pick a number. This is all data provided from staff and historical data from the community. We input into the computer, and it is just one big giant math problem. I input data into the math problem, and at the end, the program gives me an answer at the end of it, okay? So it's a very comprehensive Excel spreadsheet that I'm going to go through pretty quickly here, so we're not here all night. But again, if you guys do have questions at the end, please feel free to ask, because there's not a number in this program that I can't explain where it comes from and why it is what it is. All right, so with that being said, the first thing we always do when we look at rates is we always take a look at what you guys currently charge, okay? And as was explained earlier, you guys, the $788 cost per thousand, and then you have a ready-to-serve charge. Now, what I've done with this, because the proposal is to kind of get rid of a lot of those individual little line items and lump them all into one ready-to-serve charge and a commodity charge to go along with it. The only separate line item that I'm aware of, at least, is the new loan payment will still be a separate line item. Okay, so that new loan and all that information about that new loan is not in this program right now, okay, because that's a separate rate and has already been calculated out with the needs that you guys have, at the city. So this is how many individual customers you guys have, how many 3/4 inch, inch and a half, 2 inch, okay, and then obviously, as was talked about earlier, the ready-to-serve charge is different depending on your meter size. So the bigger the meter you have, the more your ready-to-serve charge is. Now, the commodity charge, that's $788 per thousand, that's not different. That stays the same for everybody. Okay, so if you use 1,000 gallons of water, you pay $788, whether you're commercial, residential, a church, a school, it doesn't really matter. You're gonna pay for the same amount per 1,000 gallons. All right, next, we take a look at your meter equivalents. The decision that we're going over with staff and board was to go to an industry standard for your meter equivalents. So meter equivalents are how we calculate what that 1 inch meter customer charge should be, or what that 2 inch meter charge should be. Okay, it's a ratio. And there are a couple different industry standards that can be used when calculating this, and I've got both of them up on the board right now. So you'll see the yellow column. That's what your guys' the current meter equivalents are right now. To the right, the column at the far right, with a factor based on 3/4, that is the AWWA meter equivalent. It is the American Water Works Association, and they essentially for decades at this point have been our industry standard setting organization. Okay, if there is meter equivalents, they also do specifications and recommendations for the type of pipe that's used and the type of valves that are used and which joints are used. Essentially, they are the organization that sets the water and wastewater specifications and standards that are applied across the nation. So the meter equivalent for AWWA is on the far right column, and then the other equivalent table that's used on a regular basis is strictly based on size. And that's the one that starts with that square inch equivalent, meter equivalent factor. That's what the size is. Now, the decision here was made to go to the AWWA standard, which is that column on the right, and that's what was used to calculate what the new rate changes would be for all the bigger meter customers. Essentially, the way it works is the AWWA system is, the multiplier is 1, as you can see in that yellow box on the far right. Okay, well, a 1 inch customer is 1.67. What that means is you take whatever the dollar amount charge is for a 3/4 inch customer, you multiply it by 1.67. That's what the ready-to-serve charge is for a 1 inch customer. If you had an 1.5 inch meter, you multiply the 3/4 inch rate times 3.33, and that's what the 1.5 inch charge would be. Either standard is perfectly acceptable to use. AWWA was closer to the existing meter equivalent that you guys had, which is one of the reasons why it was decided to go with that, at least at this point. And what that does is it turns all of those customers, as you can see on the column kind of on the left there, where the 1798, that's how many 3/4 inch customers you have. You invoice all of those customers 4 times a year, and their selected meter equivalent is 1. And basically that it calculates an annual meter equivalent. That's what the program uses to make all the calculations. So we have to get, to make all the math work, you gotta have one common variable. So we turn every customer into an annual meter equivalent, and that's what the program uses then to calculate the rates. That's the common denominator of the whole rate study, okay? So 533 annual meter equivalents is because there's 81 inch customers times 4 times a year they're billed times 1.67 gives the annual meter equivalent for that. and all those, so a total annual meter equivalent of 8,776 annual meter equivalents. Because essentially what the rates do is they figure out like, hey, how much money is needed to run the water and sewer system? And then to figure out your ready to serve charge, you simply take that dollar amount and divide it by 8,776, and you get the amount for the ready to serve that needs to be charged for every annual meter equivalent. Okay, if you live in just a standard house, or you've got even a commercial property with 3/4 inch meter, that charge stays the same because the equivalent is 1. But if you have like a 2-inch meter, whatever that annual meter equivalent is individually, you got to multiply that by like 5.33 to get what your ready to serve charge would be for a 2-inch customer. Okay. All right, next we take a look at how much water you guys sell. Okay, because again, that dictates how much revenue is coming in on the commodity side. That's $7.88 per 1,000 gallons. And it does fluctuate some. There has been, over the last 5 years at least, a downward trend in water usage. And if anybody's curious, I can't give you the answer of what 10 years ago it was because I only went back 5 years in history. The whole point, though, is to find out if there is any trends. In your guys' case, it was typically kind of a downward trend in water sales. It's also because this rate program, we're trying to calculate how much to charge for your current budget year. Well, we don't know exactly this year exactly how much water is going to be sold. So we take a look at historical data to kind of try to figure out what would be a good, fairly conservative number that we can use on how much water you're going to sell this year, okay? And that's where that decision in the red box, the 102,000, basically 102.5 million gallons of water sold is what we use to factor in the for the rates. Now, how this affects things is if I put a higher number in, because the maximum year I think was like 110. Yeah, it looks like that's what the total max is. It's about 110.6 million. If I put that in, it would lower the rates. But if you don't sell that much water, then the water system will be revenue short that year. Okay. If I use a number that's too low, you're going to collect extra revenue if you sell more water than that. So the idea with this is to try to find a balance where you pick a number that's conservative, where we're at least going to sell 102.5 million gallons of water. That's what we're kind of calculating out with this program. If we sell a little bit more, you'll be a little bit revenue ahead, but as you'll see as I get in later into this program, like extra revenue is always needed for water and sewer systems, and you guys are no different when it comes to that. So we used 102.5 because of that downward trend. I'm sure some of you guys are looking at like last year's number going, well, hey, we sold 115.3 million gallons last year. The biggest reason for that was that Cotterville had a couple leaks last year. You guys build a township off of a water meter. So their water leaks, you guys build them for, but traditionally that's not how much water they use. Okay, so last year they used 36.3 million gallons of water. They usually don't. That was kind of an anomaly year for that. They have been very consistently right around the 24 million mark over the previous 4 years up there. So that even though, yeah, hey, we sold 115.3 last year, that's probably not a very accurate number for what you'll sell this year because my understanding is Cotterville's found those leaks, fixed them, and they're not buying the amount of water that they bought last year. They're not going to have to buy that much water this year. Okay. All right. Next, for this, we have to take a look at what your budget is, okay? Because the rate should be set to whatever your budgetary needs are for that year. Now, with that being said, any like big one-time purchases are kind of pulled out of this. Like if they had to spend $50,000 to buy a new pump, that's been pulled out of this part of the rate program because it's factored into a different part, which I'll go over in a minute, okay? But the part of these expenses, this is to make sure that all of your normal yearly expenses are covered. Okay? And in this case, you guys have 3 different departments. One is the administrative side that we've already kind of talked about a little bit in the previous presentation. The other one is the distribution system, and then the treatment is 3 different departments within the water fund that all incur expenses. Now, I only have like part of one of those pages up here just for the presentation, but it was 3 different pages with different expenses for each category, for each one of those separate departments, okay? Because how much you need to charge for water and sewer rates is the biggest factor is usually, it's expenses and loan payments. In your guys' case, it's your expenses, at least at this point in time. You know, because your normal annual expenses are much higher than your current loan payments, but those are usually the two biggest factors on what is affecting your rates. Next, on the water side, you do have one water loan with an annual payment of $153,000, so that's factored into the program too, because that has to be paid for. And as Katie mentioned earlier, that $1.20 per 1,000 gallons that is currently on the water bill was only generating, with what you guys are currently selling, about $100,000. The loan payment is $153,000. Now, granted, this budget year is the last year that this payment will need to be made, but it's not going to go away because currently the DWSRF loan payment that you guys are right now seeing on your bill isn't covering the entire full loan payment for that loan when those payments need to be made. The shortage for that should be made up for kind of with this debt payment. So you're going to stop making this debt payment. It's going to be transferred over into the next debt payment that you have. And I will say for municipalities, this is very, very common. Typical loans for water and wastewater. This loan happened to be a 20-year loan. It started back in 2005. But most, so your current loan now is either a 30 or a 40-year loan.
years, yeah.
Okay. If you get a USDA, that's another very common place to get financing for water and wastewater for rural systems. They're at 40-year loans also. So very, very long payback periods. Usually by the time a 40-year payback period is done, you're ready to replace the next bit of water main or the next collection system, or you need water plant improvements at that point in time. You know, and you're just going to swap one loan payment for the next loan payment.
So a good point for everybody to learn, for us to learn, is don't tie future loans to commodity sales, because as water sales drop, you're not going to have enough money to pay the loan.
Yeah.
So tie it to something else other than the sale of the water.
And I don't know why the decision was made to use $1.20 on the commodity to pay for this loan payment, but as I made a very good point, typically loan payments are paid using a ready-to-serve fee, because that's the only way to guarantee revenue. Because of the loan payment, over the next 40 years, that loan payment is really not going to change. The amount of principal and interest changes, but the total payment is going to stay pretty consistent within a couple $1,000s of one another from year to year to year for the whole 40 years. So that money always, since that bill needs to be paid, if everybody in town stopped using water, that loan payment still has to be made. So that's hence part of the reason for having that ready-to-serve charge, that base charge where it's a flat amount that's collected every single month from all the water and sewer customers, is to make sure that some of those fixed expenses, like loan payments, wages, things like that are fixed, they're not going to change from one year to the next, really. They need to be paid regardless how much water is used. So that's kind of the point of that ready-to-serve fee, is to pay for those fixed expenses. All right, next, I know it was brought up, gentlemen here had a question about, are we planning for preventative maintenance? Are we planning for equipment that we replace, as it breaks? The answer to that is absolutely yes. Previously, not a lot of planning for that, but that is changing, okay? The current staff, that's why there's so many assessments going on, different inspection things going on, so that they can determine exactly, kind of estimate what the needs of the water and sewer system will be over the next 20 years. We have two sections of the rate study that deal with the current equipment that you have and any capital improvement needs that you have. Basically, and the way that this works essentially is it just kind of, we use one, and the first instance is fences and gates, okay? Originally put it in 2000, we're gonna estimate that they're gonna last for about 40 years. The total replacement cost is $2,500. What the program does is it adds an inflationary cost every single year between now and when the expected replacement date is, because the cost of that fence is going to go up year to year to year. It might be $2,500 now. 20 years from now, it's not going to be $2,500. It's going to be substantially more. The program takes that into account, and then takes all of those individual pieces of equipment that the water system has, and kind of estimate how long that piece of equipment is going to last, what it costs to replace it right now, and the program then calculates an annual amount that needs to be saved. So that way, when there's $2,500 that to be spent on fences and gates in 2040, that money will be in the bank, ready to go to spend on that. This is that building the reserve accounts to make sure that when equipment breaks or when it needs to be replaced, the money should be in the bank to replace it. This will help alleviate the need for outside financing, the loan payments that you guys have and things like that. Because the more money you can save to put away to replace that equipment, the less money you have to go out and borrow. And don't get me wrong, municipal loans for water and wastewater, I think it was 2% is what you guys currently are paying on that loan. That is extremely low interest rate. But when you're 2% interest on $12 million worth of loans is still a substantial amount of money. So planning for the equipment replacement that needs to happen and planning for capital improvement needs and trying to collect at least a portion of that through rates will help alleviate the need to spend all that money on interest later on down the road. Okay? So the equipment replacement, this list here, and this is not the complete list of equipment. This is a 3-page list, and this is maybe a quarter of the first page. This equipment that's on this list, the stuff that's already there, it's already in the water system, okay? And unfortunately, like when it comes to water and wastewater things, when you have a pump that breaks, when you have main that breaks, you don't have the luxury of just waiting and like, hey, we're gonna wait 3 years, we're gonna save up a little bit of money, or we'll say, we'll fix it in 5 years, we'll just kind of mothball it for now. You can't, it has to be replaced as quickly as possible and get back up in operational. So again, this allows, for that money to be set aside every single year so that when that equipment needs to be replaced, the money's there. And you don't have to go try to find it, or you don't have to borrow it from the general fund or any of the other, things that may have happened in the past. Okay? What it does is it gives all those kind of totals, how much annually is needing to be collected, and then all those expenditures, all those equipment replacement expenditures are then calculated out. That's in the gray column that you see on the chart there. Some years there are large amount of expenses, some years there's no expenses, and then there's some years where there's just a little bit here or there. As you can see in that gray column, and again, this isn't the whole list, it's just for the next about 9 years. Some years you get 3 years in there where there's no expenses whatsoever. But then there's other years like $8,600, but then there's some years where you have to spend almost $100,000. And if I had more of the sheet, then there's other years where there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that needs to be spent in a year. Now, this is just a very educated kind of estimate on it, because some equipment is going to last longer than we expect, but there's also going to be equipment that doesn't last as long as we expect. So the idea behind this list and creating this kind of annual amount that needs to be collected is to kind of average out so that there should be money to replace any equipment as it needs to be replaced. So for all that stuff that lasts longer than expected, it's going to help save a little bit more money so to fix the stuff that's not going to last as long as expected. Okay. So with that being said, on this particular page, is it takes $65,000 from rates annually that needs to be set aside in the bank to pay for the equipment on this first tab. And like I said, I have another slide that'll show all the other 2 tabs and the total amount. But again, this is money that needs to be set aside every year so that there is money in the bank to replace all this equipment when it needs to be replaced. And unfortunately, even with the new loan and all the water treatment plant projects that are going on and all the water main that's going in the ground right now, it's going to bring everything up to really good standards as soon as the project's done. But unfortunately, before that 40-year loan is paid off, there's going to be pumps at the water plant that are going to have to be replaced before that loan payment is made. There's, the roof's probably going to need some work. There might be some doors that need to be replaced. There's all sorts of that equipment that won't last 40 years. So the idea behind this is to make sure that money's getting set aside so that there will be money in the bank to replace it. Okay. Equipment, I kind of relate this to in your own house. Okay. This is your furnace, your refrigerator, your water heater. Things that if they broke tonight, you went home and your refrigerator wasn't working. Ideally, it would be nice to have money in the bank so that tomorrow you could go buy a new refrigerator and get the old one replaced as quickly as possible. That's what this equipment list is doing for your water and wastewater systems, okay, is creating that kind of money in the bank so that we can get it fixed and replaced as quickly as possible, okay? All right, next we take a look at capital improvement projects. These are more long-term assets that you have. Water mains, hydrants, valves, typically anywhere from 75 to 100-year lifespan. So they're a much longer-term thing. And when it comes to water and wastewater, you can only kind of really start saving to replace these when you're about 20 years out from replacement. You guys are really at the point now where like pretty much everything needs to be replaced now. You guys are replacing a lot of it with this current project, but there's more that still needs to be done because your system is at end of life for the most part. The majority of your system is at end of life. So these projects here are projects that are not included in the current $23 million water project that's going on right now. These are the additional water projects that are scheduled to be done. Capital improvement projects are, if you want to equate this to your house, this is like, I want to remodel the kitchen, or I want to add a bedroom onto the house, things like that. It's stuff that you need at some point in time, but there's a little bit more flexibility. Like, hey, wait, I just had twins. I need an extra bedroom on my house. But they're little right now. We can make do with what we have. We're going to save some money over the next 5 years. We're going to, use that saved money to help pay for the project. We're also going to, maybe we'll go out and get a home equity loan for the remainder of the project. But you've got a little bit more flexibility on when you're going to do it, how you're going to pay for it, whether it's all in-house or with, loans and grants and things like that. But again, it creates kind of that same running balance as the equipment list did. Okay? All these projects do, 5 years from now, it's like how much annually would need to be saved to pay for these projects. The column on the left, where the yellow, or where the green box is right now, my cursor box is at right now, that's the total estimated cost of the project. The next column to that, the lower dollar amount, is 25% of all of those costs. That's what we're right now using for the rate program to calculate the running balance that I'll show you guys on the next slide. So when I talk about funding capital improvement projects, it's a little bit different than the equipment. Equipment is 100% funded by rates. This capital improvement list is not 100% funded by rates. At this point in time, we're trying to fund 25% of these projects. Because even if you do get financed, there are still upfront costs, substantial upfront costs, to do the engineering, the applications for the loans and grants, that all have to happen before you get awarded that loan or grant. So it's always a good idea to have, you need some money in the bank to pay for those types of expenses. So right now, the program's only using 25% of these expected costs to calculate the running balance. And in order to keep everything in the black, that column on the far right, it does dip into the red, as you can see, the 187,000, but that's because there's $700,000 worth of projects that need to be done in 2032. And again, this $250,000 annually paid for by rates to fund these projects is only 25% of these projects. The other 75% of these projects are going to have to be funded either through a loan or a grant or a combination of the two. Okay? So again, that's $250,000, sounds like a lot, but it's only 25% funding. And as you can see, in 2032, it's still going to be a little short. All right, so with that, that is basically all the things that go into the rate program in order to make the calculation. The next two slides are a detailed breakdown of how all those separate tabs that are already covered, how they impact the rates. Okay, so as you can see at the very top of this, in the blue, you can see different departments. We got general, administrative, system maintenance, and water plant. All three different departments in the water system and what their annual budgetary amounts are. And all three totaled up is just shy of $1 million to run the water system, just normal operations of the water system every single year. Okay? And these numbers, again, are pulled off of your budget and the actual expenses that have happened for the water system in the last 3 years. That's where those numbers come from. So you can see in yellow that 33.97, and then the 5.931, that's $33.97 of the ready to serve charge and $5.93 of the commodity charge just to generate the revenue, that $976,000 worth of revenue needed to do normal operations of the water system every year. Okay, below that, then we have the debt payment factored into that. Okay, and then the combined total, so the debt and the operating expenses, that's that total at $39.31 of the ready to serve goes just for loan payment and normal operations expenses, and $6.86 of that per $1,000 or per 1,000 gallon cost to pay for those types of expenses too. Okay.
Joe, will you repeat, what was the ready to serve that you just said for the water?
Well, for just to pay for operational expenses and the loans, it would need to be $39.31. Okay? But we're not done yet, because we had to factor in the other stuff too.
Okay.
So the bottom part of this is the detailed breakdown of all that equipment maintenance from the equipment tabs and the capital improvement costs. As you can see, there were, I guess, 2, not 3 on this, I think 3 equipment pages for the wastewater plant, I believe. So you have the 65,000 and 50,000 for each one of those equipment replacement tabs, just to make sure that money is there when all the current equipment needs to be replaced. And the capital improvement, that 250,000 in capital improvement funding there also. The whole total, what the rate program is saying for the increase, is that your ready to serve should be increased from $17.83 to $52.01. Okay? And the commodity charge of 908 is actually your current commodity charge. Because currently you guys are charging $7.88 per thousand and the $1.20 for the loan. Okay? So the proposed rate increase is not to increase the price per thousand, but to increase the ready to serve amount. Okay? Part of the reason for this is, if you can see the little yellow box kind of in the center of the screen there where it says 30.55%, that is the percent of revenue that is collected from ready to serve. Okay, so about 31 cents collected through ready to serve, and 69% of the revenue needed to run the water system is collected through the commodity. If we kept the commodity, if we made, like, say, an equal percentage increase to both the commodity charge and the ready to serve, when we did this math initially, the guaranteed revenue that the water system was bringing in was only about 11%, or it was less than 20. I don't remember if it's quite as low as 11, but it was definitely less than 20%. Which basically means if you had, like, a big customer that stopped using water, that went out of business, that shut their water off, or if everybody stopped using a bunch of water, that's going to have a much bigger financial impact on you because there's not as much guaranteed revenue coming in. Okay? So you always want to try to get your guaranteed revenue, that revenue from ready to serve. There's no hard and fast number you need to get to, but higher than 20%. So with making all the increase to the ready to serve, it brought up the revenue to about 31% is collected through ready to serve. So still the vast majority of the revenue collected to run your water system is still coming from the commodity. 69% of it is still coming from the commodity. But that's why the increase was put on ready to serve and not on ready to serve and the commodity.
Joe, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
If there would be appropriate time. With this proposed rate, can you, based on your experience, and I know I probably should have told you about this beforehand, but where would we be across the state in terms of ready to serve or commodity fee? In your experience, as you go all over the state, literally looking at these different rates and comparing them, our current rates and then what's proposed. Would you comment on that?
Yeah, not a problem. So the first thing I want to say is comparing municipality to municipality and water bills for neighboring municipalities, it's never an apples to apples comparison. Okay? But I know everybody does it. Okay? It's unavoidable. You know, my sister lives in the town next door and her bill is more or less, or whatever the case might be. That kind of comparison is always going to happen, but it's never apples to apples. Even if I was to find a community exactly your guys' is the exact same size, exact same amount of people, same amount of customers, your needs are going to be different than their needs are for your water system. Everybody's systems are a little bit different, and the needs required are a little bit different. Part of the reason why your annual expenses are so high is because you have a full treatment plant versus some communities that don't need full treatment. They're just literally kind of pumping water up out of the ground, hitting it with a little chlorine, and sending it out to the customers. So you guys do have more expenses because of that. On the flip side, though, your water quality, the water that's coming out of the tap when you turn your kitchen faucet on, is a much, much higher quality than that straight well water that's just hit with a little bit of chlorine. Okay? There's a lot more treatment goes on. You guys have no iron, no hardness, or very little hardness, and no iron virtually in your water. It's soft coming out of the river. So you have a very good, high quality water. But unfortunately, you pay a little bit more for it than, say, a similar municipality that pumps it up out of the ground. But in those communities, they're gonna have iron through the roof, they're gonna have to have water softeners in every single house, and you know, each homeowner's gonna have different expenses because of that. So really, you guys are at an advantage for the quality of water that you guys have here in Marine City is by far and large a lot better than a lot of the municipalities that I go to. With that being said, your rates right now at 5201, this is per quarter, this is not per month, this is per quarter. Municipalities your size, very typically I'm seeing monthly ready to serve charges somewhere in the between $30 and $40, which means quarterly they're somewhere between $90 and $120 a month, a quarter for the ready to serve. Okay, so you guys are still very, very low, even with this like huge increase to the ready to serve, still very low when it comes to water and sewer rates. Now, this 5201, you are adding that new drinking water state revolving fund loan on top of that, which brings you kind of more up into the average. $9.08 per 1,000 gallons. It's a little bit on the higher side from what I see doing rate studies around the state, but definitely by no means the highest by any stretch. You're probably somewhere about 60 to 75% range on the, you know, the amount on that, on the commodity. Okay. So overall, your guys' water rates are still much lower than a lot that I see. And again, it all just depends on the system's needs and what they need. I've had some communities I've done rate studies for, their monthly ready to serve is in the $60 range with a commodity charge very similar to this. It's just because their needs are greater than what your needs are, or they have a lot less customers. There's a lot of factors that go into it.
And our current rates that you looked at when you first walked in the door, where did those?
Extremely low, like in the bottom 10% of rates across the state. And I've done a lot of rate studies across the state. So yeah, what you guys currently have, what you guys are currently charged for water is it's in the lowest, it's definitely in the lowest 10% of any of the rate studies that I've done, by far. So,
Thank you.
all right, so that was a detailed breakdown, just 3/4 inch customers. This is the overall rate increase, proposed rate increase for all the different meter sizes, okay? The detailed for just the 3/4, because that's where the vast majority of customers are. But everybody's rates are affected the same way, okay? Everybody's getting the same percentage increase, okay? So, you know, $52.01 for a 3/4 inch customer, but a 3-inch customer is $520.13, okay? It's that bigger meter. All right. And then if anybody's curious, that's typical customer bill, just water. Okay, so if you use 12,000 gallons in a quarter, okay, your old bill was $126.79. Your new bill is $160.97. It's an increase for everybody of $34.18 for all 3/4 inch customers. And that's because that increase is on the base, on the ready to serve, the base charge, which everybody pays regardless of usage. So,
What about the $18 that's on the debt? You guys were saying that you're gonna leave that in?
the new loan,
No, this is where we're paying off the loan this year.
the existing loan,
2005 millage for $1.20.
How does that factor in? Is that still factored in here?
yes, it's still factored in here. So the $150,000 roughly that needs to be collected to make that annual loan payment is factored into this program.
So,
After this year, that will go away. So after this current year, you won't have that $150,000 expense anymore. But that $150,000 in revenue that's collected through this rate will just be transferred right over to the new loan that you have.
so we're not gonna collect it, we're gonna leave it in there. So what does that do to that increase, is what I'm saying?
If we were to refund it, we'd have to collect a greater percentage.
So.
Instead of just rolling it over.
$52 a quarter, and that includes the $18 still?
No.
That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, so that
That's
actually
fine.
goes to your commodity usage. One more slide, Joe. Back. You'll see it goes from 788 for the commodity to 908,
Yeah.
which isn't an increase at all because you're currently paying that already between the 788 and then the $1.20 based on usage.
Yeah, the loan, that $150,000 loan payment is factored into it, but it's part of that 908. So that's why the 908 is higher than the 788, but it's just the 788 plus the $1.20 that you guys are currently charged. So the 908 is what you guys currently pay per 1,000 gallons, and that's not gonna change.
But if
the
it
revenue
fell up-
collected from that $150,000 in revenue that's collected for that loan, just because that loan is going to get paid off, absolutely. So after this budget year, there won't be a $150,000 expense for that loan. However, the amount of money that you guys are collecting with your current new loan payment isn't collecting enough to make the full loan payment. So this $150,000 in revenue that's factored into this increase, yes, that loan's gonna get paid off, but that $150,000 in revenue, it's gonna go from the old loan and it's going to go right towards the new loan, okay? So that's why it's still factored into the program.
So we're looking at a 200% increase on the meter.
On the ready to
From
serve,
$17 up to $50.
somewhere around it, yeah.
And then we say proposed new rates, and then the reason why I asked it, I have to read at 8,
Mhm.
over here on, proposed. Are we voting on this, or is the
No.
city's gonna say, this is what the new rate is?
No. So this is for education of the public. We're still studying this, it still has to be
I
fine-tuned.
understand that.
Eventually, to go before the commission, we will present to the commission where the Board of Commissioners would make a determination. There'd be a public hearing, there'd be an ordinance change.
Okay.
Yeah, so there'd be time, much more public input. Very candidly, we're at the point, I think, you can see with numbers if you're a businessman, that there's no more room to kick that can down the road and to do it. I mean, literally, we have to make a determination. I mean, infrastructure and its costs are never sexy to anybody. A new swimming pool, everybody loves a community, whatever, but toilets flushing and clean water until they're not there. And unfortunately, we've kind of skipped a generation and a half of doing those infrastructure improvements, and here we are, as Joe said, 40 years, and we're end of life with our infrastructure.
Yes, absolutely end of life with the vast majority of your infrastructure. And that, again, that does have an impact on the rate increase. It's more now because of that. Unfortunately, but we can't change the past, we can just kind of fix it from this point and try to make it right going forward. And that's this proposed rate. Yeah, it's proposed because it hasn't been voted on, there's no official, the rates have not changed at this point. But this proposed rate is kind of what the program is saying the new rate should be, with all the current data that we have in. Now, there is some work still being done to make sure that we've got the best numbers for the program. So these could, when the final vote comes through to actually vote on a rate increase, they might be a little bit more, they might be a little bit less. But this should be very, very, very close to what the current needs are for the water system. Okay.
Can you explain the meter sizes and how that is different?
Yeah.
Why there's different?
Why a
meter
3-inch
sizes?
customer pays so much more than a 3/4
Yeah,
inch
or,
customer?
yep.
Okay. Part of the reason behind that is, the simplest one is because a 3-inch meter costs 100 times more than a 3/4 inch meter. That's part of it. But most of it really has to do with capacity needs. Okay? Even though that 3-inch customer might not use the whole 3 inches of water all the time, the system has to be able to accommodate it if they did. Okay, so because of that capacity requirement, you pay more per quarter to kind of pay for that. You're essentially like a 3-inch customer is the same as 10 3/4 inch customers. Okay, their capacity needs are equal to 10 3/4 inch customers. So that's why they pay more per quarter because of that capacity requirement. If the whole town was nothing but houses, you would only need a certain amount of capacity. The water plant would only have to produce a certain amount of water. Water tower would only have to be a certain size. When you start adding bigger customers, though, even one big customer can drastically change the capacity requirements. So they pay per quarter more on a ready to serve, and usually typically on a commodity, they're going to pay more too, because usually a 3/4 inch customer is going to use more water per quarter than a single family household is. So their bill is going to be substantially higher every time, and that is to pay for that extra capacity. Any of those big customers might require a bigger water tower, another pump, or the water plant to have another filter, all of these things that cost extra money. So they're kind of they're paying a larger portion of that because those things that need, the size of the pumps, the amount of treatment required, the amount of storage that's required are all bigger because of those bigger customers, so they pay more than a 3/4 inch customer does. Does that explain that?
And we have a number of those customers, a school, a commercial where it has a heavy fire suppression system, things of that nature, they require that capacity.
Whereas if you only did it through commodity, they wouldn't necessarily be paying their fair share, because some of that has to do with fire suppression and things like that. And it also, like seasonal changes, like some customers don't use very much water, but then there's 3 months a year where they use more water than everybody else in town does. Vegetable produce, like processing plants are prime examples of those. I've done some rate studies where they have those types of customers, and they virtually use no water 9 months of the year, but 3 months of the year they use an absolute ton of water. Okay, but their capacity requirement doesn't change. So that's why they pay a little bit more. Like those months where they don't use much water, their bill's lower, but they're ready to serve. That base charge that they pay is higher because that capacity has to be there, has to be able to provide that capacity to them. Okay. All right, real quick, 'cause we're almost done with the water. One of the proposed changes to this is, and it was discussed earlier, because the new drinking water state revolving fund loan is based off of the number of units, not necessarily meter size. Okay, whereas the normal water rates were strictly based off of meter size. So the example I have is like an apartment building with 10 units in it. They might have an 1.5 inch meter. Right now, they are charged for an 1.5 inch meter as an 1.5 inch meter customer. The proposed change, and this change basically just bills all the water accounts the same as the new drinking water state revolving fund loan is. This is charged by the number of units. So instead of that 10 unit apartment building getting charged by the 1.5 inch meter, they're going to get charged 10 times the 3/4 inch rate. Essentially, the kind of the methodology behind this is you're going to look at each apartment unit as its own residential equivalent unit. It's really the same as a single family house that sits on its own property. It just happens to be built on top of and next to a bunch of other units, but it operates the same thing. So this goes for like apartments. It would go for any like downtown businesses that have a commercial business like down below, but then they've got, say, an apartment or a couple apartments up above. If they're only fed by 1 meter, they're billed by the number of units, not by the meter size itself. Okay, so as you'll see in the customer count, so I believe the other customer count for like 1 inch customers was 80, now it's 63. And that's because 17 of those 1 inch meter customers are multiple unit accounts. So they were added to the 3/4 inch customer count and subtracted from the 1 inch. Okay. So they're not double billed, they're just billed per unit. Same as a single family house would be. What this does for the program is it essentially creates more customers right off the bat. Because there are overall many more annual, there are about 200 more annual meter equivalents that I talked to you about that in that first tab. I don't have a slide that says how many of those, unfortunately, but it was like, was it 7,855, somewhere around in there? And the new total is like increased by 200. It's closer to just shy of 8,000 total customers. What that does, because you're adding more customers to the equation, it's more people to split the pie with. Okay, so the rate increase isn't quite as much if you start charging by the number of units versus the meter size. Okay, so instead of like the old one was what, 5201, by changing and billing by the number of units, it's $49.10. So about a $3 decrease in the quarterly ready to serve, which isn't a huge amount, but it also affects all the 1 inch customers, the 1.5 inch to 2 inch customers also. Okay. And then, like I said, a slight change to the your typical bill. The increase, instead of $34 and some changes, $31.27 instead. Again, this is just a different way to bill, but would bring it right in line with the already created drinking water state revolving fund loan payment that's currently on your bill. Okay. Any questions on the water? And I'll switch over to sewer. Again, this one will go a lot faster because it's the same presentation, it's just different numbers. So let me pull that up. All right.
There's a lot of different components that go into
Alright,
what.
so on the sewer side, again, the explanation for all these tabs is still the same. We're still looking at what you guys are currently charging. I still need to know how many customers that you have. And you have pretty close to the same water and sewer customers. There's not a lot of water-only customers and not a lot of not a lot of sewer-only customers in Marine City. So this is your current customer count and what you currently charge. And again, on the wastewater side, there is a separate component. There's a capital improvement charge on the wastewater side. And again, the proposed rates is just to include that in the ready to serve. And the one thing I didn't really cover with the water on that is it was brought up that, like, well, having all those different line items on the bill, we know where all that different money is going to. And if we lump it all into one ready to serve charge, we don't know where that money is necessarily going. It's there in the budget, okay? And the rate program shows how it's all, like, broken out and how it's divvied up. Okay, so all those same expenses, all those different line items that we're paying for, like the admin and the loan costs, all that, those are still there and those expenses are still there. It's just by getting rid of the separate line items and just having one ready to serve, one, it simplifies the bill, it makes it a lot easier. And two, it also opens up the ability to use revenue from like one department for another department. So with the admin, that's the prime example of that. You guys are only collecting $24,000 in the admin costs, but like the actual budgetary expense on the admin side was like $240,000. Some years that might be $200,000 instead of $240,000. Some years it might be $280,000. So by combining all those individual little line items into one ready to serve, if there is like a surplus in one department, but an excess, but you've got more expenses in another department, it frees up the staff's ability to be able to use the revenue collected to where it's needed for that particular time, instead of locking money into separate little tiny canisters that can only be spent on very particular items, okay? So it not only does it cleans the bill up, makes the bill easier to use, but it also makes it much easier for the staff to pay the bills, to calculate what is needed to run the system. It makes it easier. They have more freedom in where they can spend that money, and it's not locked into any one category. All right. So next, again, take a look at meter equivalents. We did the same thing on the sewer side as on the water side, is change the meter equivalents to that AWWA standard. Okay? Because again, it was lower. Your current meter equivalents are much lower than what the AWWA standard is. Again, we take a look at the amount of sewer invoiced. And again, same on the water side, the sewer has shown that same kind of decline in sewer sales over the last 5 years. Okay, and again, the decision was used to use the minimum, which in this case, because Cotterville is not, the water that Cotterville buys for the water side is not, it's billed differently for sewer. So that water leak isn't factored into this. And as you can see, like the lowest year is actually the amount of sewer that was sold last year, which is another reason to use the lowest amount, because it has been going down every year. Again, take a look at all your expenses on the wastewater side. And again, on the wastewater, there's 4 different departments on the wastewater side, and I've only got a snapshot of the first one. Yes, sir?
I'm sorry, because I gotta leave in a couple
Yep.
seconds, but going back to that, okay, if I build 1,000 gallons, because you know I used 1,000 gallons because it went through the meter.
Yep.
Now you're gonna bill me 750 gallons for waste. How did you come up with that number? Because nothing goes through a meter for that.
No. The sewer is billed off the water meter with the kind of the understanding that whatever comes out of the tap goes down a drain at some point in time. The only things that don't would be like irrigation and, hose bibs if you're washing your car, watering your flowers with your hose bibs. Everything else though that comes out of a bathroom or a kitchen tap is going to go down a drain and into the sanitary sewer at some point in time.
Are you saying like, say, 75%?
No, it's 100%, 100%. The only thing that changes is if you, like some communities have what's called irrigation meters, which are meters only for irrigation and hose bibs. They're not charged sewer, they're only charged water.
You're just charged a lower rate, though. That's,
Their water per 1,000 gallons is still the same, but they don't have the sewer charge on it. So like, say, 788 is what you guys currently pay per 1,000 gallons, you would still pay that for your irrigation meter, but you wouldn't have the sewer charge tacked onto that water use.
No, I mean, it's a lower rate for the sewage versus the clean water.
The overall rate,
If I'm paying 7-something now for my water, my sewage rate is,
624 currently.
Yeah, it is a lower
it's
rate.
just a lower rate.
it's just a lower rate. It's not like a percentage of the water that goes to the meter. That's not how it's calculated. It's just a lower rate. But your ready to serve is a little bit higher on sewer than it is on water. So that's kind of where the balance. And like I said, at the start of the water one, the numbers are totally different. The needs for the water system are totally different than the sewer system. So that's part of it too. Some communities have much higher sewer rates than they have water. Some communities have much higher water rates than they have sewer. Just kind of depends on what the needs are for each department.
Thank you.
And sir, if you have questions later on, you can call our offices. We'll be glad to take your information and get back to you.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
And these are gonna be online too,
I'm in the Stone Age.
but we can print it for you. Yes, yeah,
Thank you.
you're
So
welcome.
again, on the sewer side, Save Us Water, we went through the expenses. One new slide I have in here that I don't have on the water side is non-sales revenue. So non-sales revenue is revenue that isn't your ready to serve and is not your commodity charge. It's late fees, it's turn on and off fees, any interest that you earn. The reason that I didn't have this tab in the water side of things is because there is no guaranteed non-sales revenue on the water side that wasn't already factored into the program. On the sewer side, we had to put in 150,000 in non-sales because that's how it's the Contra bill, kind of the way Contra bill is billed for sewer. Okay, so that revenue that's collected from them is collected in a different way, so it had to be factored in a different place in the program. Okay, but this 150,000 is like revenue that's helping to decrease your rates, essentially. It's still, Contra bill's water sales also decrease your rates. It's just, they're billed differently. The way that they're billed is totally, completely different. Okay. Again, Save on Water, we've got our equipment list with all of our equipment. And again, I think that, yeah, this was 4 pages of equipment, because the wastewater treatment plant plus lift stations, it's very common for that to be a lot more equipment on the wastewater side than there is on the water side. And again, we use those 4 different pages of equipment to get kind of that annual balance needed to put away in reserves, so that when a pump needed to be replaced or when the roof needed to be replaced, there would be money there to do those replacements. Capital improvement projects, same thing. There's a number of capital improvement projects that need to be done on the wastewater side of things. Again, these are preliminary numbers. There's more assessments going on at this time to try to get more accurate numbers. Because I could say, these numbers seem extremely low for the needs of the wastewater treatment plant and your collection system that you have. I think the total is around 2.5 million, and I'm, in my professional opinion, you guys are gonna need substantially more than that to do the work that needs to be done at the wastewater treatment plant. So these numbers are a conservative number. We still use 25% of that estimated project cost. And on this side, on the sewer side, it's only $130,000 that needs to be put away annually, instead of the 250 on the water side. Okay. So with that, we've got kind of more of a detailed breakdown of your 3/4 inch customers. And again, you can see at the top the 4 different departments and what their annual expenses are. But, I mean, really the sewer needs aren't a ton different than the water. I think water was just less than $1 million in operating expenses, and loan payments. For the wastewater side, it's, 811,000. Okay, so, pretty close to the same, expenses for normal operating, the system
But no debt on
But
this
no debt.
side yet,
at this point.
yeah.
Okay, and that's a big help on the wastewater side. And again, this page just breaks out in detail the different equipment tabs, the 3 different equipment tabs that are needed for the program, okay, and the capital improvement tab. And that gives, like I said, on the wastewater side, what the program is saying is for 3/4 inch customer, it should go from $20.20 to $56.77. And again, this increase is only on the ready to serve, not on the commodity. Because on the water side, there's a 31% guaranteed revenue. Wastewater side, by putting all the increase, brings you right up to that 51% kind of right smack dab in the middle. So that you have more guaranteed revenue coming in on the sewer side than you do on the water side. Okay. And again, if we put equal percentage increases on both, it was somewhere lower than 30%, guaranteed revenue currently, I believe. Seems about right. Okay. But again, this increase is going to affect all the bigger meter customers. That's detailed out on this page here. But again, your commodities staying the same, just ready to serve. I will say, because I'll probably get this question, $56.77 per quarter for ready to serve and $6.24, still in the very low end for water rates for sewer rates that I see in municipalities with mechanical treatment. So you guys are still very low. $56.77 per, it's less than $20 a month. And again, sewer, very typically, same with water, for mechanical treatment on wastewater, which is what you guys have, I see ready to serve, monthly ready to serve rates in the $30 to $40 range, very typically. The difference between water and sewer is that your commodity rate, $6.24 per thousand, that, and the water, your $9.08 was a little bit higher. This sewer, $6.24 for sewer, is pretty much smack dab right in the middle. Okay, so you guys still, water and sewer both, even with these proposed rate increases, are still much lower than a lot of the rates that I see for very similar communities across the state. Right? It seems like it's a really big hit now, and I completely understand that. It's a huge increase. But it's still much lower than most communities are paying. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that like these rate increases probably should have been made a little bit at a time over the years instead of all at one time. That also leads to big increases like this. It's very possible if you guys like 20 years ago started doing like a 3% increase every year, you'd be probably pretty close to what the rate program's telling you need to be right now. So there's your typical customer bill. So again, it's just a flat amount change because the proposed rate increase is only on the ready to serve, not on the commodity. So basically every 3/4 inch customer bill is going to go up $36.57 per quarter. Okay, about $12 a month. All right. Again, wastewater, same as water, the scenario where we charge multiple unit accounts by the number of units. And again, sewer, same as water, it added customers to the count, which created a little bit lower increase all across the board. Okay, so 53.42 instead of 56.77. Okay, so about a $3 decrease again, but very similar to what it was on the water side. And there'd be a typical customer bill if you went with the charging by the units, not by the meter size for multiple unit accounts. Any questions?
Thank you, Joe.
Problem.
Katie, did you have anything that you wanted to add, or Jason?
I asked about the
Questions,
meters.
I do want to make one comment before we close for the evening, if there's no questions from the public. One of the first things that will come up is, well, this is an extremely large increase all at once, and I think you addressed that quite well in terms of multiple lower increases over a number of years may have been able to defer some of those costs. But the question will come up is, well, why don't we cut the size of government? What can we cut to make this less? And I will tell you, we live with this day in and day out. We look at this day in and day out. I think we run a very austere budget for the services that we give. We're a full-service city. I cannot cut our way out of this. I cannot, there's not enough services that we provide that I could get rid of in order to facilitate lower bills for the public. Do away with the police, have no police protection. Do away with the fire, have no fire or medical protection. DPW was cut a number of years ago down to 3 people at 1.4 and then 3 people. We're paying for that right now in terms of a number of different issues we're having at both these facilities and on our streets. Very candidly, we don't have enough of those people, and most days, we make do in the city offices with long hours and again, everybody taking on extra roles and extra responsibilities. So when people say, well, you need to cut the size of government, my response is, or you need to find another way to do this, my response is, okay, what's your plan? Tell me what your plan is, bring it to me, we will look at it, we will vet it, give me the options that you see that perhaps we're not finding, or we're not seeing, or we're not hearing from the subject matter expert, and I trust their judgment, they see it all over the state, they understand it, they live it. I'll be happy to show any resident what we're facing, what we're up against. I would be happy to open both plants to limited inspection to the public. Come out and see it yourself. Look at the infrastructure that we have. Look at some of the issues we have. Come in and ask me to take a look at the facility reports. Look at some of the issues we're having with equipment. And then I think when you get an idea of the magnitude of our infrastructure issues, and this has been a long summer, and I want to prepare people for a long winter in terms of water main breaks. This is all part and parcel of that process, and I think Joe said it best is the best time to start is now on a new path. What I do want to indicate is this is not a one-time fix. It can't be fixed in one time. It's gotten to a point that it'll need to be adjusted over a period of years. We will have to bring Joe and his cohorts back to the city 3 to 5 years in order to stabilize these processes and make sure that we're collecting enough funds to pay off our debts. We'll be picking up additional debt service. I will tell you that that's coming. With the water project that we're going through, we're discovering significant infrastructure issues that have to be taken care of. As Katie said, we've been robbing Peter to pay Paul. We've been using the general fund, and the general fund can't sustain that. It's impossible. So we've kicked the can as far as we can. That's not an option anymore. We're open to suggestions from people. We're happy to show everything, all the math, as they say. We want to make people aware of everything that we're doing and make sure they're fully educated. And then we hope to present this to the board in an upcoming meeting. We'll publicize it on our social media pages and city website when that will be and take the public input. But the process going forward is we have to take some actions. The state has noticed. The state has said, hey, folks, you have a problem here. You're upside down. And it's time that we address it. It would be malfeasance on our part if we were to ignore this issue and perhaps kick the can until one day the infrastructure just stops working or it collapses. And we've had some issues like that. So I would just want the public to know we're doing the best we can. We're bringing in the subject matter experts. These guys have really taught us a lot. We really learned a lot through the process. And they said they would stick with us through this and be happy to make additional presentations so that additional citizens could ask some questions. I don't know if anybody else has any other comments, or Joe, if you have anything you want to say?
A couple things, yeah, that came to mind. Is that one common question that I get, especially when there's a very large increase, is, well, hey, do we have to do this all at one time? Or can we break this large increase out over the next, 3 years or 5 years? The answer to that is yes, it can be done, okay? This approach here, what's being proposed right now is kind of the ripping the Band-Aid off. Let's do it now, let's fix it now. The advantage of stepping out this large increase over the next, say 5 years is that it's not going to be as big of an increase right now. Instead of $56, hey, let's increase it by, let's increase it to 35, and then we'll increase it to 45, and then we'll increase it to the 56 that the sewer says right now. And that can be done. The problem is what is the increase right now of $33.22 to a 3/4 inch meter? That increase, if you step it out, will have to be marginally higher every single year. The recommendation now is that annually water and sewer rates should go up. because the expenses for water and sewer go up every single year. Electrical costs go up, the cost of the equipment goes up every year, okay? All of the costs associated with water and wastewater go up every year. So the rate should increase marginally every single year. So say, just to make the math easy, say we wanted to do a 3-year step out, it was like right now it's 60% increase. Well, okay, let's do 3 years, let's do 20, 20, 20. Well, it wouldn't really be 20, 20, and 20. Okay, it's going to be 20 plus a normal, probably percentage increase, probably more like anywhere from like 3, 4, or 5% increase would be tacked on. And then also, if you don't raise rates to what the program says, if you don't rip the Band-Aid off, kind of essentially, you're going to be revenue short until you get to that 3rd year where you're finally charging like what should be charged. So every year that you're falling, every year of that step increase, you're falling a little bit behind. So then that percentage needs to be made up for also. So now instead of 20, 20, and 20 to get to 60%, you're probably going to need more like 30, 30, 30 to get up to 60% because you're still trying to play catch up all those years that you're stepping it out. This is a very common question that I get. It can be done, but there are some significant disadvantages to stepping that out. And that's the increases will have to continue to keep going over the next few years. Very substantial increases. If, with the ripping the Band-Aid out concept, this rate increase is very high right now for this year. However, going forward, the rate increases don't need to be this high unless you get like an additional loan or to do more infrastructure work, things like that, which unfortunately you guys are in the position where you will have to do some of that over the next 5 to 10 years. But without those types of like loan payments, having to take on those loan payments, ripping the Band-Aid off now, a very huge percentage increase this year. Next year, you're looking, you could be looking at somewhere around the 3% range, okay? Just a normal increase. Most of this rate increase is to catch up from years of not charging really what needed to be charged to run the water and sewer system, okay? That doesn't mean that, like, next year it's gonna have to be another $30 increase to everybody's rates. Like I said, loans aside, if there's a new loan payment that has to be made that might need that type of an increase. But just to go forward with the current loans that you have and the current expenses that you have, like next year should be a much lower amount, 2, 3, 4, 5%, somewhere around in that range. It's kind of more of a normal increase that I see across the board for municipalities. The municipalities that we do these rate studies for, some of them do a 3% every single year. Typically when I come in like 5 years later, they're like, I've done some rate studies where I'm like, hey, you could not raise rates at all this year and you'd be okay. Or, hey, instead of 3% this year, you need 4% or you need 5% this year. But again, this is that getting that process started now so that the rates go up incrementally every year. So that the idea is hopefully you don't see these big giant increases year after year after year. Because really the only thing that should create a big giant increase like this would be loans for infrastructure improvement, which unfortunately you guys are kind of in that position over the next 10 years to have to do. But those loans aside and that infrastructure work aside, this will bring you up kind of to where you should be, and then from here forward, it's not anywhere close to these kinds of increases.
The other issue, I would agree with you, that I'm very concerned that our capital needs, especially as the wastewater treatment plant and what we have here, are low. And
Yes.
I'm very concerned that those costs are going to be significantly higher. We're experiencing that on a number of different things. They'll be significantly higher than what it's pegged at now.
Yep.
So I would agree with your assessment there. That gives us pause in terms of maybe stepping it at this point because we will be revenue short.
Yeah.
We see that coming.
Yeah, you guys are already revenue short,
Revenue short.
substantially revenue short. That's a large part of this increase. And yeah, stepping it out just puts, if you've got to get it, 5 years from now or 3 years from now, you've got to get a new loan for more infrastructure improvements. That's going to just be tacked on to already substantial step increases. Whereas like hopefully this year, even though you have more needs and more infrastructure needs and more loans probably and financing that'll have to be done, hopefully this kind of gets you where you need to be now. You go a year or two maybe without much, and then the next loan, it'll have to be another big increase to pay for that loan. But once that infrastructure work is done, You go back to that typical, like around a 3% increase every single year, pretty much tends to keep everybody right on track. Yeah. Any other questions or things you guys want me to go over?
You know, I think it's important to note too, and Joe, you might agree in our talks, that commodity charges aren't increasing this year. So it's not based on usage. You know, it's, unfortunately, rates do have to go up, but it's a flat rate increase instead of a usage-based increase. I don't think it's sustainable with internal talks either. Unfortunately, in years to come, we're going to have to look at those commodity rates as well, just as the way rates increase overall. But I would agree with you that we're behind the 8 ball on it. And I think it's something that needs to happen with water and sewer being an enterprise fund. You know, we're already revenue short. I think Joe said it a couple times. And you can't keep borrowing from the general fund to pay for those water and sewer operations and expenses, so.
The other thing too is, part of the ready to serve increase, because this impacts everybody the same, regardless of how many. The single person household, their rate increase is exactly the same as the family of 5 that lives next door, which I know in some people's minds might seem a little bit unfair. Part of the reason for that though too is, one, it was the kind of the guaranteed revenue to be collected every single year. But the other part of it too is when you have a very heavy commodity charge and a very low ready to serve charge, you do kind of you get a little unequal with how it's billed. Yeah, the more water you use, the more water has to be pumped, the higher the expenses are, but they're not like, those expense increases are very minimal compared to infrastructure costs and things like that. For instance, like the cost to replace the water main in front of the single person house in the family of 5 that lives next door is exactly the same. Okay, so kind of bringing that ready to serve charge up for everybody is kind of equaling that kind of part of the equation out when it comes to the rates. Okay, because that water main cost is the same for both lots, as long as the lots are the same, width. That cost is going to be the same. So each lot, even though one might have 5 more people on it than the other one, that cost to put that main in front of their house is still the same. So they still should pay that same equal part of that water main.
Any other questions, folks?
The only point is, we're not the only ones in this situation. I'm sure there's an awful lot of communities that are in the same boat we are. So, I mean, it's not like we're doing this and the other local communities aren't, everybody's gonna be.
That's a great point. Sometimes we kind of look at ourselves and think it's woe us and it's only us, but Joe, I assume you see that all over the state, that we're not an unusual community with.
No, unfortunately, you guys are not in an unusual situation. And it was actually, the gentleman, like was here earlier, said there's a 200% increase. Yes, it's a 200% rate increase to the ready to serve, but there's no increase to the commodity charge. So it's not really a 200% increase. It's much, much lower than that. If I was to break it out and put an equal percentage increase on both, I think I did that at one point. I want to say it was 30 or 40% overall increase. I have done 200% increases across the board, 200% to the ready to serve, 200% to the commodity. In communities, I've done 100% increases to both. I've done rate studies for 150% increases to both. The common denominator with all of those, where you guys kind of fall into that same category, is no comprehensive rate study done in a number of years. Even if you guys have raised rates a little bit, it hasn't been enough. And when you go too many years in a row, either with no increase or an increase that's not adequate, you get further and further behind every single year. Like I said, all of these rate increases that I've done with very high increases are all because of not raising rates on a regular basis. I've also done plenty of rate studies where it's, hey, you need a 4% increase this year across the board. Like, that's it. But that's usually when they've been raising rates every single year to kind of make sure that they're keeping up as their expenses increase. So the other part of it too is, once you get all your kind of those reserve funds, the capital improvement needs, the equipment replacement needs, once you get that kind of dialed in, that stays pretty stagnant. And at that 3% increase, we'll make sure that all that equipment gets replaced when it needs to, and there's money in the bank when you need it to replace that kind of stuff.
So essentially, just big, we talk all the capital, for every dollar, there's a percent going to what we've already processed for you. saving for things down the road and paying for, like, what,
Yeah, yeah.
I guess, saying it that way.
Yeah, every water bill needs to not only cover current actual expenses right now, but also put money aside to replace equipment when it needs to be replaced. Every bill needs to have that, like, built into it. So water and sewer funds are not allowed to make profit. Because this is brought up frequently as a question, like, well, you're putting extra money away. That extra money is not profit. That extra money is earmarked, and the program earmarks that any extra revenue collected in the water or sewer system was earmarked to pay for capital improvement requirements or equipment replacement at some point in time in the next 20 years. So there's no profit collected. Any extra revenue collected is going to be spent. It might not be spent this year, might be next year, it might be 5 years from now, but it all is planned to be spent. And that's kind of the enterprise funds have to work. They're not allowed to make profit. They are allowed to put extra money aside, but it has to be earmarked to replace equipment, to, replace water mains or sewer mains, or, revamp a lift station, or, do a water plant or wastewater plant improvement type of thing. So.
There's no other questions. I want to thank our city staff and Michigan Rural Water Association. Joe, we appreciate your presentations, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon.
Yep.
Thank you, folks, for enjoying
Ask
us.
questions. If you have any questions, come in, call us.
Absolutely. We
Yeah,
have
we're
to engage
available.
with everybody.
I've yet to find a question I couldn't answer using the program, so don't be afraid to ask the question. I can come up with an answer.
Thank you. Good night.